Love this podcast? Support this show through the Acast supporter feature. It's up to you how much you give, and there's no regular commitment. Just hit the link in the show description to support now.
Hi everyone and welcome to the Cognitive Recalibration Podcast. As always, I'm your host Sravan. We actually don't have Sravan here with us today because he's more committed to watching the Boxing Day tests than this podcast. But we have two superior substitutes. So one is Bhargava Cherukuri and one is Bharadwaja Cherukuri. The brothers have joined us and we're going to be talking about the latest DC release, Wonder Woman 1984. So they've just watched it, so they're very fresh out of the theatre. I watched it last night. Welcome you two.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, sir.
So you've both been on before. Bhargava's been on for 4 episodes?
I think 4 now, yeah.
Yeah.
We started with Crimes of Grindelwald.
Crimes of Grindelwald.
Then we
Shazam.
did Shazam, Game of Thrones. Oh, 3.
Three,
Done
yeah.
3, yeah.
2 of them were horrible and one of them was good.
One of them was good, yeah.
And you were on a long time ago.
Ant-Man and the Wasp.
Ant-Man and the Wasp. Wow.
The best one.
That was one of our first episodes, actually. So welcome
That was
back
a good one.
after a long time.
Glad to be back.
All right, so Wonder Woman 1984. I'll give you a bit of background on the movie and then we can get into our thoughts on it. So basically, this movie was delayed quite a few times. So it was meant to release originally on the 20th of December 2019. So basically a year ago it was meant to release.
Yeah.
And then it got shifted. So the initial shift was because it wanted to avoid a clash with Rise of Skywalker.
Yeah.
Which it probably didn't need to in hindsight. And then obviously COVID hit after that, and there have been multiple delays. So all up, I think it's been delayed about 7 times.
Yeah.
And finally, Warner Bros. Took the executive decision to release it on Christmas Day of 2020. And it's actually a simultaneous release on HBO Max as well in the US. But obviously here in Australia, we don't have HBO Max, so we've gone and watched it in the cinema because it's safe enough to do so for us at the moment. A bit about the cast and crew. It's directed by Patty Jenkins again. She's returning from the first movie, starring Gal Gadot, the Wonder Woman of our generation. Chris Pine is back. We'll talk about his character. Kristen Wiig is a new character in the movie. The trailers sort of give away a lot of her arc, unfortunately, but
Yeah.
we'll talk about that. And Pedro Pascal, a guy who I've seen a lot of in the last week or so because I just binge-watched Mandalorian Season 2 as well.
Spoiler alert.
He's in this movie. I guess we'll get down to the story. So I'll get one of you two to explain what the story was. You can take turns, or you can do it together if you want.
Okay, yeah. So we'll start with this. Obviously set in 1984. So Wonder Woman's been around. She's more accustomed to the world now after Wonder Woman 1, where she comes to the world for the first time. And the setting is basically there's a character, Pedro Pascal's character, businessman. Business is failing. He's obviously trying to do his best to get an image out there that he's very successful with a TV commercial ad that's been running, and he's not. Everything's failing for him, and he comes into possession with a particular artifact and uses that to then amass power, I guess. A few characters are shoehorned in, but they all sort of play a part, and it's about how Wonder Woman sort of fights against this particular power that Pedro Pascal has. So without giving too much of a spoiler.
And I guess the character of Kristen Wiig, she's sort of entangled in the plot,
Yeah.
as a part of this.
Yeah.
I've got a bit about the comic background actually, but maybe I'll do that once we get into spoilers because we'll talk about the characters. So
Yeah, I reckon.
first we'll do non-spoilers, just our initial thoughts and positives, negatives, and then we'll jump into spoilers.
Sure.
So if you haven't seen the movie, you can keep listening for now. I'll start off with my positives, and we can go around the table.
Go for it.
So my positives are, I thought the performances were all really strong. Gal Gadot, Kristen Wiig, Chris Pine, they're all really good, but the standout for me was Pedro Pascal.
Yeah.
I think he was exceptional in the movie, especially because he is a villain and he's a pretty bad guy, but there's still somehow a soft spot for the guy. We could get into more of it in the spoilers, but I sort of liked his whole arc, how he played it as well. So that was one big positive for me. I thought all the action scenes were pretty well shot. There's probably about 3 or 4 big action scenes, and unfortunately they're all featured in the trailers as well, I think. But I thought they were all really good. And there was a few emotional scenes that really hit well. So Diana and Steve have a couple, and Pedro Pascal's character has a couple.
Yeah.
So I thought those were really good. And overall, it's based in 1984, and I think they embraced that tone of the 80s really well. So it is reminiscent of Christopher Reeve's Superman, especially the first scenes in 1984. The movie doesn't actually start in 1984, but the first scenes in 1984 are very reminiscent of that tone.
Yeah.
And I thought that was done well. Any positives from the both of you that I haven't mentioned, I guess?
Haven't mentioned. I guess the music was good. The score was
Hans
good
Zimmer.
in certain parts.
Yeah.
And I think everything else you touched on. Yeah.
Did you have anything else in particular that you...
If anything else, I think the CGI was sort of pretty well done. In a couple of scenes, I think, I'm not going into the negatives yet, so sticking with the positives. I think some of the CGI done when Diana's sort of beginning to fly as well.
Oh, yeah.
So that's a spoiler or not. But I think those sort of scenes sort of captured the CGI and the environment really well. So I think that was done.
Maybe we'll start with your negatives.
Yeah,
it sounds like
sure.
you have more than me.
Yeah. I mean, look, for me, the positives were just the acting, the music, I think, as well. I thought the acting was great. But for me, I felt like... So you mentioned that the action scenes were really good. I actually felt like the action scenes could have been done a bit better. I felt like there was a bit of CGI choices that were made that were like... It just took you out a bit. It just felt a bit unreal. It felt like you can kind of tell that there were like, you know, actors on strings and tension, like being pulled away and stuff. And it was very like... The first Wonder Woman was very gritty, very really... I would say more realistic than this one. This one felt very like flashy, very comic booky, very like cheesy in some parts.
I don't know if that was an intentional decision or whether it just turned out that way, but I know what you mean. Some of the action sequences did look a little bit almost going back to that 80s era sort of action sequences.
Yeah, and I also felt like there were too many scenes of those, you know, epic slow moment motion captures with just Wonder Woman flying through the air or deflecting bullets. I felt like they did that maybe 4 or 5 times in the first half an hour of the movie, and it just felt like it was a bit too early to have that sort of epic music, you know, hype with Wonder Woman doing, you know, whatever she's doing. I just felt like they could have left maybe that for the end, like one or two scenes. It
was also in like every scene. It wasn't, because usually those sorts of scenes are reserved for like a final like culmination of like a person's powers, or like they're finally showing like their capabilities or whatever. But they do this in like every major sequence. And
almost every action sequence. Yeah. The other negative for me was I just felt like some of the actors, the characters, didn't need to be in the movie, and I'll touch on this in spoilers as well, but I felt like one of them was shoehorned in, and one of them, their character, while good, it just didn't feel like they had much impact on the story. So I'll touch more on that on spoilers, but I feel like if they shortened the movie by about half an hour and they sort of made different choices about where characters went or whether to include certain characters, it might have been a bit more succinct and a bit more watchable without so many convoluting plot lines. So
I think I agree with everything said there, and we can go into it more in spoilers, but one thing I will agree is the movie is definitely too long. I think it's longer than it needs to be. There are a couple of characters that probably were underdeveloped. One character in particular that was definitely underdeveloped. To be honest, they could have removed some characters and it really wouldn't have made that much of a difference to the movie. I'll go into more in spoilers because there's one character that I want to talk.
I feel like the rope felt really unrealistic, the way it moved. It didn't feel like it really... I don't know. It's a bit weird to mention, but when you sort of observe the Wonder Woman, how she uses her rope, it doesn't like... It sort of stands out and sort of distracts you from what's actually happening in the scene. I feel like that CGI could have been done quite a bit better.
As in the lasso of truth.
The lasso of truth, sorry. Yeah, lasso of truth. It just, you could tell when she was like moving her hand, all she had to do was just move her hand to her hip and the rope was in her hands. Like, they just programmed it. You could really see it a bit. And so that was a bit... It was a... The reason why I mentioned it is because it's distracting from the actual storyline sometimes.
She does use the lasso a lot more in this one, I feel, than the first one.
Oh, and one other thing, just quickly mention. At the very start, there's like... Well, I won't mention too much, but there's nothing particularly unique about Diana's like acrobatics, like her ability to do anything. I felt like she could be replaced by any Amazonian like warrior. And that's evidenced by the first 5 minutes of the movie. Like the way Amazonian people do things. Like they keep talking about how Diana's like... this like, oh, you're special, you're great, you're doing all these things, but what's actually unique about her, that's not really too clear. Apart from the fact that her father's Zeus, and it's not really brought into the story too much.
They explore that more in the first one, I feel. In this one, they sort of
they don't really bring it up.
Don't really pick it up, even though that first whole sequence is sort of... I don't know what they were sort of setting up with that. They were setting up something, but it sort of never happened in the movie. So
we actually saw Jeremy Johns' review of the movie before this, and he mentioned that he reckons they did that scene because they had those actors on contracts, and they had to.
It looks like
include them
because they don't come back in the whole movie, and that whole sequence, even though it was quite good. I actually enjoyed that whole
sequence.
Sorry?
Is a Ninja Warrior sequence.
Yeah.
It's pretty much Amazon Ninja Warrior.
Yeah, I thought it was a good sequence, but it just didn't actually lead to anything. There was sort of a moral that Dinah learns from it, but it doesn't come back in the movie.
It doesn't even relate to the main story.
I told Butchie a theory I had of the thing, but I'll get into it when we get into the spoilers.
Okay, cool. Looks like we've got a lot to talk about in spoilers.
Yeah.
So we'll give our final thoughts, final ratings. So overall, for me, I still enjoyed it. I thought it was a good time. Maybe because I didn't have massive expectations for this one. And going by DC's track record, I think it's still one of the better movies that they've done out of the DC movies. So I'd still recommend it. I'd still give it a cognitive recalibration.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I mean, I think coming out of the movie, I think I said I didn't like it. But as you mentioned, it's probably one of the better DC movies that's come out. So based on that and based on the acting alone, I'd probably give it a 5 or a 6 out of 10.
Okay.
I reckon that's
That's fair.
Yeah, I'd say probably a 6 out of 10, yeah, I reckon. Just given everything's happened throughout the year, it's probably affected production a bit. That might have been the reason why some things... I don't know actually when they would have finished production.
I think they would have
before
finished,
this year, right?
They would have mostly been done because it was meant to come out in June.
Year.
Right, okay, yeah. No, so there's not
Yeah.
much of an excuse, to be honest. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, we're missing Torrent's arbitrary rating.
Oh, yeah. The 2 out of 600 or whatever he does.
We need to crack that formula one day.
Okay, I guess we'll get into spoilers then. So if you haven't seen the movie and you do care about spoilers, come back to this point in the podcast and in the episode and you can listen to our spoilers. We can talk about that first sequence. There's this Ninja Warrior sequence that you mentioned. I found it good. It would have been more effective if it actually led to something, but it didn't. So overall, if they cut that whole part out, and it goes for like 10 minutes or something, it's pretty long.
It's a pretty solid
It's a pretty long sequence.
So that's 10 minutes that you could easily shave off the movie. The character that I was mentioning was underdeveloped was Cheetah.
Yep.
So Cheetah is... I've got some comic book stuff, but Cheetah is meant to be... And, I mean, it's not the worst... the worst way they've done an arch nemesis in the past. Like, obviously, there's been worse examples than this, but this was definitely a little bit underdeveloped because they sort of follow her character for about half the movie, and then she just disappears for about half the movie, and then she comes back and she's Cheetah. And she turns into Cheetah in, like, one scene. And it's just at the end, and it's not great CGI. That's probably one of the parts that didn't have very good CGI. In terms of the character itself, she's actually quite an old comic book character. So she was first introduced in 1943, and there's been 4 different incarnations of Cheetah. So the one we got was Barbara Minerva in this movie, but there's been 3 other ones. So Priscilla Rich, which was the first one, Deborah Domain, and there's actually been a male Cheetah, Sebastian Ballesteros. The most popular one from the comics is Barbara Minerva, which is what they've used for this one. So what were your thoughts on Cheetah? I think I think everyone will agree that Cheetah was probably not done that well.
Yeah. Look, she was definitely... I felt she was shoehorned in. I understand why they chose to go with that story because, the Dreamstone is obviously how she gets her powers. I don't know, in the comics, do you know whether... Because I know she asks the Dreamstone... Oh, like her wish is to be an apex predator. But does she ever wish to be like Diana in the comics? Like, do they ever have that relationship?
Maybe in some of the comic arcs they do, but there's been so many different versions. I know one of them is literally just like a suit that turns her into a cheetah.
Okay.
But I think Barbara, one of the arcs, I think is this one. How she asked to be more like Diana.
Yeah. I don't know. I felt like it was too shoehorned. I understand why they did it. They needed a fight scene at the end. Something capable of fighting with Diana. I personally would have been okay if it was just Pedro Pascal.
Same. I think it would have been better if it was just him. I don't mind them having the character of Barbara in the movie.
Yeah.
But she didn't have to be Cheetah in this movie.
Yeah.
They could have done her in the next movie.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that would have been all right with me.
Yeah, I definitely think, in terms of, to be honest, since I haven't read the comics, I don't know the full capability of Cheetah. So I don't know what they were going for in this movie. And I talked to Bhargava a bit about this before, but when you sort of put Cheetah up against like Wonder Woman, in the past like 3 or 4 movies, we've established Wonder Woman as this character who's gone up against like Ares, the god of war, like Doomsday, and has like done a bunch of other stuff, like almost like godly kind of things. And then you have Cheetah, who was like, I mean, to me, it seemed like from the trailers and from the movie that she was like a slightly hyped up animorph character who can turn into a cheetah and who's agile, super strength, and impervious to bullets. I didn't really see how they could really compare to Wonder Woman. Like, how is this supposed to be an appropriate villain? That I didn't get that sense from the movie, so it didn't feel like I really was intimidated by Cheetah at all.
There's one scene where she was slightly intimidating, but she's basically bashing up a civilian. So
Yeah.
I mean, that she wasn't against Wonder Woman in that scene.
Yeah.
And there was one scene in the White House, I guess, which was reasonably
Yeah.
well done. But then Wonder Woman, there's this whole thing in this story. I guess we should probably go through his story in spoilers. But there's this whole thing about the Dreamstone, which we just talked about. But when you wish something with the Dreamstone, you lose your
Something
most valued possession, I think.
That's what they say. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Monkey's
for Wonder Woman, she wishes to get Steve back, and her most valued possession is her powers, I guess. That's what they establish in this movie. And so she's slowly getting weaker and weaker throughout the movie. So when she does face Wonder Woman in the White House, she's sort of at a pretty weak
Sort of
state
an
by
equal,
then.
Yeah. And Cheetah's monkeys, like the thing that Cheetah gives away as part of the powers thing is not really explained. Like Wonder Woman says that you've lost your humanity, you've lost your warmth and stuff. I feel like it's a bit of a cop-out. Like,
and there's really like one or two scenes where you see that she's
lost her humanity.
Yeah,
where she gives like
or
food to
like,
that
that she
homeless guy.
has humanity. Like
Yeah.
there's one scene how she's like walking in the park and there's some homeless guy and she gives him food.
Yeah.
That's one scene.
Yeah.
I don't really see any other scenes
There's
where
no-
she was like she meant to be like this really generous, nice person, because I didn't get that from her like initial character. I didn't get that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I felt it was a bit of a cop-out. Like, there was no real sacrifice with her particular wish.
It felt more like that was a natural consequence of power than the monkey's paw. Like anyone with that power could lose their humanity, because power just by necessity can cause you to be blind to all sorts of things. But it didn't feel like her personally, like what did she actually that was specific to her that she lost?
Yeah.
But I guess in the end it was just her humanity.
I guess we can get to Maxwell Lord, so Pedro Pascal's character. I thought this character was actually well done, and they actually spend a decent amount of time on his backstory as well. So he has a son, and I think the whole emotional arc with his son was pretty well done. But he's a pretty horrible guy in the movie.
Yeah.
He's not a very good guy. He comes around in the end, but he's not a very good guy. So what happens in the story is he knows about this Dreamstone. So obviously he's been doing some research over time, and he knows about it, and he ends up acquiring it from the Smithsonian, and he basically wishes to become the stone. What does he lose? Does he lose his health or something? Because he starts like deteriorating in health.
It's his
right?
health slowly. Yeah, he loses his health slowly.
Yeah.
But again, they don't explain that, right? Like,
Because I thought he was already not well because he was asking for his vitamins all the time.
I think maybe they were saying that he's so conscious about his health that he's taking vitamins, and
Maybe,
that's what's
yeah.
precious to him. But it wasn't really clear. Like, is he like diseased, or like is he just overconscious? Like, how is that his priority? If not, because I mean, it seems to him the most valuable thing to him is more so like getting more in his greed and money and things like that. I don't know. It just wasn't too clear what his bane was, I guess.
and this is the thing. This is what I was a bit concerned about with the movie, was that when they chose to do the Dreamstone as the key element in this movie, it's like there's so many sort of technical questions that you'd have to forego to get this sort of story out there. And one of them is, how does the wish system work? How does that monkey's paw thing work? They do sort of touch on it, but it's never really explained to the point, because like we still have questions on it, right? Like I still have a question as to when Pedro, or when is his name
Maxwell.
Yeah,
Maxwell.
Yeah.
When Maxwell says, I want to be the stone. Well, what are the limitations of that? Like, why does the stone become him? Why doesn't he just like his consciousness manifest in that particular Dreamstone, if that makes sense? So it's like, I feel
And
like
at the end, what happens? So he revokes his wish, but what happens to the stone then?
exactly, yeah.
Is it just gone forever, or does it reappear?
Yeah, is it remanifested in the world?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's just like, there were too many technical questions, and I felt like they didn't do the best job of explaining the limitations of the wish system. And even Cheetah, like I'm pretty sure she gets 2 wishes, even though the thing says
He
you
gives
only
her an
have one.
extra wish,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
And that doesn't make sense to me either. So
I guess she made her initial wish on the stone itself,
On the actual
and
stone.
then the second wish was
It was
with.
reformed.
yeah, because what I thought would happen was, I thought that would be the flaw, in that you can wish for the stone, but when Maxwell asks to be the stone, then the people who already wished got another one, and then Wonder Woman uses her second wish to undo everything, if that makes sense, because Cheetah uses her second wish in the helicopter with Maxwell. And I was like, oh, does that mean that people who already made a wish with the stone get the second one as part of your thing? But I don't know, it wasn't touched on. But I felt like when you use an element like that, like the Dreamstone, if you don't explain, or if you don't put sort of limitations or boundaries on it, it can be misconstrued. A lot of questions can arise.
It's probably in my opinion, one of the most overpowered things that we've seen in the DC universe so far. That's not just like in like some superpowered human being, but it's an actual conceptual power
Yeah.
where you can like make anything, literally anything happen with just making a wish
Instantaneously.
As long as
Yeah.
you have a human being who has not made a wish, and you can somehow convince them to sort of.
And
like,
Max
get a wish.
chooses what to take from people as well, doesn't he?
He
Like,
basically tells them.
he
He,
tells
tells them
them.
what to wish for.
yeah. And then he chooses what to take as part of that cost.
Yeah.
Like,
Oh wait,
that's what I don't.
The actual limit is the person has to be able to give it to them. Because remember, that dude had sold his oil to the Saudi Arabians, so he couldn't give Max's oil.
Yeah, that's
So
true.
it
But
has to be the person's power.
Possession, yeah.
it has to
They
be
need
in the
have it,
possession.
yeah.
But it also, like they mentioned, that it's what's most precious to you. And like the guy's security force isn't the thing that's most precious to him, right?
Yeah,
like,
that's fair, yeah.
He like literally chooses what to take. So if they explained
Yeah.
that part, I would have been a bit more like even the limitations behind it.
What are the stipulations? But yeah,
Yeah.
as well.
I feel bad for the guy who just wished for a coffee. I mean,
Oh
he
my
missed
God.
out on
He missed out on so much. And he probably lost so much as well. That one copy, what did he lose?
The funniest is when the girl's like, I wish for all your kind to go back to Ireland, and the cops start arresting everyone. They just go around finding Irish people
And
and
he's
start
like, I wish
arresting.
that you dropped dead. She just like,
How do they know who's Irish?
Yeah, that's
Just
my
without
question,
even talking to them.
Just go around to Irish people going, bastard.
I got a little bit about Maxwell Lord's comic book character. So he's a little bit different in the comics, I think. He is a much more recent character. So he was introduced in 1987. He's actually appeared in Smallville, apparently. I haven't seen Smallville,
really?
but apparently he was in Smallville. And he was also in the Supergirl TV show. So yeah, in the film, he basically has the power to acquire wishes. But in the comics, he has the power to persuade people to carry out their own wishes. So it's slightly different. So he can persuade people to do stuff.
Right.
Whereas in this, he needs them to wish for it in order for them to do something, or in order for him to get something. So it's slightly different. And apparently in this film, Patty Jenkins wanted his role to be similar to Gene Hackman's Lex Luthor, so from the Christopher Reeve Superman movies.
While we're touching on the Dreamstone, the whole, like, you know how at the start, like, he has to be physically touching someone and for them to make that wish. But at the end, they sort of go away with that. It's like, as long
Yeah,
as
it's eye
he's
contact.
like, not eye contact, the particles or something, like from
On
the
the
satellite
TV, yeah.
going through. Again, like,
Particles touch everyone or
Yeah.
something like that.
yeah, like, it's obviously the ending sequence. And I don't know, I just feel like they didn't really flesh it out enough. Like, they didn't flesh out the whole thing enough, just while we're talking about Dreamstone. That sort of took me away from it. I was like, what's happening? You know, you
And I
start
thought the
asking.
climax was the whole third act. In the first movie, the third act was definitely the worst part of the first movie, because if they had a better third act, I think that movie would have actually been better than what it was. It's still a good movie, but I think it would have been great. I think this movie, the third act's probably not as bad as the first one, but it's still not that great. The fight with Cheetah was just there to be a fight. They just need to be a fight.
Yeah.
One of them need to fight someone.
Yeah.
Obviously, if she fights Pedro Pascal, she'll just kill him. So
Yeah.
they couldn't do that. The whole thing with him, you know, broadcasting and like apparently being able to touch everyone in the world, and him just standing in that vortex and yelling.
Yeah.
I
What
thought
was
that
that
was that was just a bit too
Yeah.
much. Yeah.
Oh, bloody pedophile. Remember that scene when he's like yelling at the guys, like, I want to be able to touch everyone as well as I can. Like,
That's going to be memed so hard after.
yeah, I know. It's going to be memes.
And
Yeah.
you know when his kid makes the wish as well? What was the kid's?
What did he lose?
What did he lose? Like, did he?
Lost all his toys? I don't know.
Yeah. And then he also gets two wishes as well. Which you mentioned as well. He wishes. I'm not sure if his second wish came true though. His first wishes was when it was with his dad in his office. He wishes his dad to be great, whatever. And then the second one, when he's looking at the TV, he says, "I want you to come back." But like, I'm not sure if that was an actual wish that made him come back. Because I mean, after he came back after he had renounced
His wish.
so I don't know if that would actually come true.
Or maybe in order for him to come back, he had to renounce his wish. So maybe it did come true.
Oh, maybe Patty Jenkins is smarter than we thought.
Yeah.
No, I don't think so.
But I thought the end scene where he like meets up his son and
Yeah.
they have that emotional exchange. I thought that was good.
Yeah.
I thought
That was
he obviously does like father son stuff pretty well, Pedro Pascal.
yeah, that's a recurring theme.
Another
Yeah.
scene where it's like, how many weekends do I have this kid?
Oh yeah.
Like, poor guy. Oh, like, I was also talking about Max Lord, but like, you know that scene that they show at the very end, like literally like the second last scene in the movie is like his backstory about how he's like come from an
Yeah,
abusive
that was
family.
so
Very late decision to include that in the story.
firstly, I didn't even think it was about him, but then they started showing more like shots of it.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh, this must be you know, his backstory.
Yeah.
But like the initial two shots, I'm like, okay, there's this kid that, you know, his mother's getting domestically abused. Then there's this scene where he's like wet the bed or something and his dad's yelling at him. And I'm like, okay, these are
See
just...
how much How much there was on that bed? It was like the entire mattress was
That's like a
covered.
good leader.
Like, I think the dad has a right to be angry there. It's not like an accident.
Yeah. But then, like, slowly it sort of started making sense. But the first two scenes, I was like, I thought it was just someone else that was making a wish or something. Some
Right.
kid that was making a wish. But yeah, that was probably unnecessary, to be honest.
Yeah, or put it like earlier on in the movie, right?
Yeah.
Like you can't have a whole movie where this guy does shit and then explain his motivations or like his,
Right at the end,
you know,
yeah.
right at the
It felt more like a last ditch effort to get you to empathize with the villain,
Yeah.
as opposed to like if you do it throughout the movie, you can okay, so this is motivation for doing that,
Yeah.
and building him up, so you're on his side, as opposed to just simply being against him the entire movie. And at the last minute, like no one's gonna side with him and say, "Oh, okay, I see where you're coming from." No, you still.
To be honest,
you
I
know,
was
stuff.
already empathizing with him before that stuff. Like, I didn't need that stuff.
Oh yeah. I know what you
Yeah.
mean.
And it's because
a
Pedro's
kid.
such a great actor, right? Like
Yeah.
you empathize him from the first scene you get him, you're like, man, you see him when he's like purporting this like television superstar sort of mentality, and then he comes to his office and it's all desolate, and you're like,
Yeah.
oh man,
That was
that's
actually
so
a really
tragic.
good scene.
Yeah,
because like
they
he's
did well.
walking into his
It's
business,
all empty,
and then
yeah.
he has receptionist, his everything. Then
Well,
as soon as he
it's
comes
all
in,
up front, right? So like
Literally,
all the front, everything that people see is like very nice and well decorated.
Yeah.
But then he goes up to the floor where people are meant to actually be working. There's no one there.
that was actually one of the most impactful scenes in my opinion. Like where he's just there, and then he has his son there, and then it suddenly humanizes him as someone who has this vulnerability, like in his child, and he has like he's a human being who has like debts, who has this and who has that, and he's just looking for a way out. And that sort of, I think that did more than the backstory towards the end, to be honest.
Yeah. But overall, Pedro Pascal was probably the best part
Yeah,
of this movie.
definitely.
I thought he was.
Yeah, did an amazing job.
Amazing actor,
Yeah.
very talented.
So I guess we haven't talked about the other actor in this movie, the other returning character in
Yes.
this movie, Steve
Christopher
Trevor,
Pine.
Chris Pine's character. So I think this was what you were alluding to earlier as
Yeah.
well. So you thought he wasn't.
I don't know. Like I watched the movie and like afterwards I was like what part did he really play in the grand scheme of things? And like even his like the way he farewells in the end, it's just him being like his wish retracted, I guess. Like even the way he comes back, he's not actually back. He's like inhabiting the body
Of someone else. Yeah, yeah. And I think only Wonder Woman sees him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As Steve Trevor.
Steve. Yeah,
as
because
well.
even he sees himself as the guy, right?
Yeah.
Like when he's looking in the mirror. So I don't know. I felt like there were some really good scenes, like the whole mirror with Steve sort of trying to find life in 1984, similar to how he, helped Gal Gadot in the first movie. I thought that was really good.
It's kind of
really
a
well done.
reversal of the roles there.
Yeah. I just felt like, because like he pretty much goes before the final act, right? Like just as the final act starts up, he goes. Yeah, I just feel like the impact wasn't there, or like the need to bring him back. Like I would have been fine if they didn't bring him back. I would have been okay with that, because I remember talking to Bharadwaj about this. But like this kind of goes into the whole tone of the movie as well. But there are only two women who cast wishes in the movie. One of them wants her boyfriend back, and the other one wants to be like
Powerful.
not powerful, but like wants to be like popular and because she doesn't know that Diana has those powers, right? It's just she wants to be popular and noticed and like.
Well, I think she says,
recognized.
because she sees Diana
that's
take
true,
down
yeah.
that
Yeah,
guy,
yeah.
right?
Yeah,
So she's
strong,
like,
yeah,
I want to.
yeah.
I want to be like
Yeah,
her, yeah.
yeah.
And I just felt like that's a bit, I don't know, kind of undoes the whole like, women empowerment thing, I feel. And yeah, so I feel like I would have been fine if Christopher Pine wasn't in the movie, or if he was, at least have him come back
For good,
and,
not just
for good.
kill him off afterwards again.
Like to be back and to actually take an active role in the movies beyond that, because I actually thought he was going to stay. Like I thought it was going to be a situation like Marvel where Bucky comes back and you realize that he actually survived and that he's back for good, and he starts doing stuff, and I thought that would have been pretty cool. But he goes, and I felt like just like the impact of the character itself and implications of him being back for a third of the movie just wasn't as strong as it could have been.
Well, when you explain, I agree with basically what you said, but I think the reason he was in it, there's two reasons. So one is obviously Chris Pine's was very good in the first movie, and they sort of thought it would be good to get him back. He's a very popular character. He's very charismatic, and he's good in this. There's some good comedy sequences with him as well. The way it fits in the story is I think Diana needed to sacrifice something, right?
Yeah.
In order to take on, well, at the very end, she needs to sacrifice something. And I thought that emotional sequence was good, and all the sort of romantic moments between them were very nice as well.
Yeah, that's true.
But there's probably a way they could have done it without Chris Pine. I agree. There's probably a way that she could have probably sacrificed something else. Like she could have wished for something else. And the way they sort of set it up as well, at one point I thought they had to either destroy Pedro Pascal, Maxwell Lord, or they had to destroy their wish itself. I didn't know there was this mechanism that they could actually revoke their wishes.
Yeah.
So I thought she would have to like there had to be some stage where she had to
Had to
like,
kill. Yeah.
kill him or like do something to him, like just get rid of him in some way.
Jesus
Yeah.
Christ.
But obviously they didn't go that route.
It's probably a good thing as well.
So after she revokes her wish, so there's a sequence where she like flies and does some stuff, right? It's this extended 5-minute sequence where she's flying. I thought she was flying towards Pedro Pascal, but she wasn't.
Oh, yeah.
She wasn't. She was just flying.
She was just
and then
flying,
she
yeah.
comes back to her apartment.
Just flying to her armor,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, but I don't think her armor was that far away because she was like flying for like 5 minutes. She's like
Yeah,
flying
yeah.
past airplanes and stuff. So,
Yeah.
so she obviously goes somewhere, then comes back, gets her armor, and then goes to Pedro Pascal.
Like halfway through
Yeah.
a flight, she's like, oh, I need the armor.
She just forgets.
I need the useless armor that doesn't do anything.
That being said, I reckon that was probably my favorites in the movie. I think just after she says bye to Steve, and then she goes up to just start to learn how to fly. I think that had the best cinematography, the music, and the setting and everything like that was done really well. And like just that, it wasn't even a long sequence. It was like, I don't know, 2-3 minutes, maybe 5 minutes. But like that whole sequence was like probably my favorite part of the movie. I think because like everything came together really well in that scene. Everything else, there was like an element missing there, element missing here, but.
I guess speaking of the music, so it's Hans Zimmer.
Yeah.
Yep.
So apparently, this is what I didn't know. Hans Zimmer apparently said that he wouldn't ever do a superhero movie again after Batman vs Superman.
Yeah.
But he's done this one, so he's obviously coming back to doing it.
But he used a bit of music. Like I was talking to Bharadwaj about this, but he used the Batfleck music in that scene. I believe it was when Cheetah's looking down on Wonder Woman, when she lands
When
on
she's
that
in cheetah form.
in cheetah form, yeah.
Okay,
When she's looking
yeah.
down on him, on her. I'm pretty sure that's like the Ben Affleck Batman music when he looks at Superman for the first time. I think it's
Okay.
either that one or it's in BVS at the end when he's actually fighting and they're like face off.
Okay.
It's one of those scenes. I remember that music, and I looked online and they were like, yeah, they used the Batfleck music for that as well. So
Okay.
I'm not sure I'm not sure why.
It's not
maybe
really
Hans didn't.
related to
Yeah.
Batman at all.
I know.
but
Like
yeah,
I was like,
yeah.
maybe Hans just couldn't be bothered like writing like a maybe
a
just thought the
different
fight
tune.
scene was
Yeah.
because the fight scene wasn't that good. It was like CGI at night.
Nah, it
and
was-
you know that when they do fight scenes at night, it's because they know the CGI is
It's not
good.
great. Yeah. That fight scene wasn't great. To be honest,
Yeah.
it was just there to be a fight scene.
Yeah.
It wasn't that great.
And you couldn't even see what they were like doing particularly
Exactly,
well,
yeah.
and it wasn't too clear. Like they were literally just clinging to each other on ropes. That was most of the fight.
Yeah,
on like the
there was a
wires
whole
and the.
part where she's clawing at Wonder Woman's armor or something.
Yeah.
She's like breaking it, and that goes for like a minute.
Yeah.
That scene, I swear to God, they got from God of War from the Valkyries. That's a reference that some people might get if they're listening, but that is like exactly how they did it in the game. That's my 2 cents.
Okay. Yeah.
That was
I'm
your
playing the game.
sidebar.
Yeah.
Another
Moving
bit
on.
of trivia on Cheetah. Apparently, Emma Stone was first approached. Well, she was actually offered the role to do it, but she declined. And then Kristen Wiig was offered the role, but Kristen Wiig was always Patty Jenkins' first option.
Right.
Yeah.
That'd be, I feel like Emma Stone. I'm not sure if she would have been as intimidating as Cheetah. I don't see her. Actually, I reckon she could do the Barbara part really well, but I don't know.
Is there anything else in the movie before we go to there is a post or mid-credit scene?
Yeah.
We can talk about. Is there anything else that
I guess like we can talk about like implications as well, right? So like this has been mentioned before, but like no one mentions 1984 in Justice League, Batman vs Superman, and it's like
this whole thing went down? This is a pretty big thing to happen, right? Like the whole world's pretty much
Like
Yeah.
World War III.
This should be mentioned somewhere because then I think in Justice League, right? Batman's like, "Oh, you went in hiding for like 50 years or whatever." He says, "Like, what were you doing all this time?"
Yeah,
There's
exactly.
this whole
Like,
confrontation
how do you
between
know-
him and Wonder Woman, right?
yeah.
If this whole thing happened, I'm pretty sure people will know that Wonder Woman exists.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Batman, like Ben Affleck and stuff, they would have been in that universe when the wishes and stuff sort of...
Yeah, he would have
Like,
been alive.
he would have been
Yeah,
alive
yeah,
when that
yeah.
was happening. He would have been watching TV.
Yeah,
I
and
wonder what he
Superman
would have wished
probably
for.
would have been like a kid, so
Yeah.
he would have been around as
Exactly,
well.
yeah. So, like, implications-wise, like, they obviously didn't think that through. If they're going to make it a grand-scale event, obviously they would need to reference it in those movies. And the other one for me was the fact that in the first one, you get a taste, like, you see Ares coming down. In this one, they talk about how Dolos, the god of treachery, was the one who created this gemstone. And I feel like they could have done something with that. They could have brought the gods into this story somehow, whether you see them in the form that would have been better for me. Like I feel like that's one of the big wonders of Wonder Woman's story is the fact that the gods are directly tied in with her story, and it's so cool when you see it in the cartoons and the comic books. You see the gods, like, you know, they're not allowed to take part because they're forbidden, but some of them do, and you see how Wonder Woman navigates the boundaries of what she's allowed to do with what she can do, and it's a really cool like dichotomy that I feel like they did somewhat in the first movie with Ares coming down and fighting her directly. In this one, I felt like
there was no there was a couple of references to gods. Well, it wasn't disconnected.
Much. Yeah,
it was
very
disconnected from that.
Like,
yeah.
and you don't see like she never references or like talks about her home. I forgot what it's called. Themyscira. Yeah, she never talks about it. And yeah, I don't know. I feel like it was a bit disconnected from what makes Wonder Woman's story so magical. And yeah, it would have been cool to have that element in the movie to a certain degree.
So I guess on that topic, there's one sequel planned, and that will be in modern day. But there's also a spin-off planned, which will focus on Themyscira. So I don't think Wonder Woman will actually be in that movie. So it'll be between when she leaves Themyscira, which is the first movie, and this movie. So that sort of time period. And both of them, I think both of them are being developed by Patty Jenkins. So the next release will actually be Amazon's movie and then Wonder Woman 3. But they'll probably be quite a while away because Patty Jenkins is doing a Star Wars movie next. That's her next project.
Interesting.
And there's this whole standoff with her and, well, not just her, a lot of directors and Warner Bros. At the moment with HBO Max and them releasing everything straight to HBO Max. So I don't think she was particularly happy with this movie being released straight to HBO Max in the United States. And there's been a lot of other directors that are not happy, like Chris Nolan, even though it technically didn't even really impact him. His movie released in cinemas, but the director of Dune,
Denis Villeneuve,
he wasn't very happy about it. So we'll have to see how that plays out. So potentially there may not be Patty Jenkins' Wonder Woman movie, depending on how that plays out.
And is the series going to be sisters, based on the sisters?
Amazonian warriors?
It's called Amazons of Themyscira, so I don't know what they'll do. Maybe we'll be focusing on her mother and her... Is it her aunt?
Yeah, mum's younger sister, the warrior. Yeah, that makes sense.
But she dies, doesn't she?
In the first one. Yeah. In the first one? No, in BV...
Justice League.
Justice League, she dies.
When, I've got that guy's name, the villain's name already out. Steppenwolf.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think he just annihilates most of the Amazonian... There's some alive, I think, right? I mean, after Justice League. Oh, sorry, just a quick time my theory. So with that 5-minute sequence at the very start, the only thing I can think of that ties into the rest of the movie is at the very end she says there's no shortcuts or whatever, you can't cheat your way in life or whatever to that degree. And then I think that's somehow supposed to tie in with the fact that everyone tries to wish their way through life, and that was a shortcut that Max Lord tried to take, but it wasn't really tied in explicitly. That's literally the only thing I can think of.
And I guess it's tied in with her wanting to have Steve back, she can't have him back because he's gone, and she just has to come to terms with that. Yeah.
That's literally it.
I guess it is. Maybe that's Patty Jenkins.
I hope it is. Otherwise, that's such a waste of films to have that and do nothing with it.
Cool. We'll talk about post-credit scenes. So there is a post-credit scene, and there's actually this mini sequence where they talk about this god, I guess, Asteria. Yeah. And there's a very short post-credit scene where you see a woman walking. It looks like Wonder Woman. Actually, she was Wonder Woman back in the day. And she saves a pram from getting trampled by a pole or something. And she's like, yeah, I'm Asteria. And she announces herself, and then comes up on the screen Linda Carter as Asteria. What I didn't get from that was that just like a fun post-credit scene, or is that like is she actually going to be Asteria?
Or is it going to be like a continuing thing in the next few years?
Because I thought that was just to pay tribute to her as being Wonder Woman. And I think it's been 30 years since that show happened or something, or 40 years since that show happened. So that maybe it was just to pay tribute to her. I don't know if they're going to continue with this as her being that character. Yeah. And in that flashback, I got the sense that she was blonde. I don't know, maybe I didn't see it properly, but it didn't look like her in that.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah. And she says she's been around for a long time too. So I was at first I was I'm hoping this is a tribute. But I'm worried it's not now, because the way she said I've been here for a long time is has she been alive all these years since that battle where she supposedly passed away, or she didn't make it out?
That'd be really interesting. What if she was the next villain? Because everyone thinks she died at that battle, right? What if it got turned around or something like that, and she ended up not joining forces with evil, but she ended up twisting the myth somehow? I don't know. That'd be an interesting take as well, instead of just ditching her in the last minute.
I guess the fans of that show, they would probably
they wouldn't like it.
They'd probably enjoy it if they had both Gal Gadot and her teaming up or something. Yeah, maybe that would be fun.
Something like that.
Yeah, it's interesting. Oh, the other implication I missed was the fact that they jump over World War II, and I was wondering does
surely Wonder Woman would have done something in World War II?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Surely. And I think there's a photograph in the movie they show of. I think you mentioned that she was helping out Jewish prisoners from
one of the camps.
concentration
camps. Yeah. I was like, surely that's a better story than this one, right? Like, it's sort of similar to the first Wonder Woman movie, but it would have been cool to touch on or see how, like, what impact she had on World War II. I would have loved to have seen that, because she's been in the world for a while at that point. She's obviously still got friends. Yeah, I just think it would have been interesting to see her sort of take a side in World War II and, like, fight to help peace as opposed to fight against a nation, if that makes sense. So yeah, like, even if they touched on it, I was waiting for someone to talk about like what happened in World War II, because that was only 40 years after the events, 40 years before the events of this movie.
Yeah, I guess there's a lot of continuity issues with this movie. I feel like it should probably be taken almost as a standalone. Maybe linked to the first movie and this movie. And that's once you start linking it to the rest of the DC movies, I think it doesn't really make any sense.
Loses weight. Yeah.
The only way I can see it linking is if, because they revoked their wish, does that revoke everyone's memory of what happened? Because the missiles got destroyed, everything got destroyed, everything that happened got put back.
Well, I'm pretty sure. Pretty sure Cheetah would remember it.
Yeah, Cheetah. Yeah.
Because she's like on this. Yeah. She's just on a rock or something at the end of the movie, right? And I'm pretty sure Pedro Pascal's character would also remember it. Yeah.
No one goes to jail though. Like Pedro Pascal's free. He's allowed to do who he wants.
And the president, so I looked this up, the president at that time was Ronald Reagan.
Yep.
And the guy who acted as the president in this movie sort of looks like him as well. I don't know if they sort of chucked him under the bus when they're like, oh, I want all the nukes. And like,
That's pretty funny. It's very Cold War reminiscent, very interesting.
I'll go through a couple more trivia about this movie. So Lily Aspel, who plays young Diana at the start of the movie, so apparently she performed all her physical stunts. Cool. Because any stunt doubles they got, she was actually performing better than the stunt doubles, so they got her to do it. Asturia's gold armor is based on the Wonder Woman armor in comic Kingdom Come. So what she wears at the end is the Kingdom Come suit. Diana used her tiara as a boomerang. I can't remember if she did that in the first movie.
I don't remember.
I don't think she does. Yeah. It's just this one that she starts.
Another thing, she doesn't do that.
The blast thing too often.
She tries it
twice.
Once.
Yeah.
She tries it once.
Because that was like a big thing in the first movie, right? Like she figures out that she has powers when she...
Yeah.
And she does that.
She does it once successfully against Cheetah towards the end in that fight.
Successfully? I don't know if it's successful.
She does it because the powers are back by that point. Because
Oh, okay. I see what you mean. Yeah. I'm thinking about the scene in the White House.
And then apart from that, that's it. She tries winning in the White House once.
So apparently that boomerang move was featured in Wonder Woman 1975. So obviously Linda Carter's Wonder Woman. Apparently, so this is interesting. So Gal Gadot, what do you think she got for the first movie, and what do you think she got for this movie in terms of remuneration?
Yeah, remuneration. Yeah.
I don't know, like 50 million.
No, it's not.
That's a lot. That's a lot.
Okay.
She's not that big.
I was thinking like maybe $1 million first movie, and this one like 5, 6.
Oh Jesus Christ! Yeah, okay.
You're not too far off. So in the first movie, she got 300,000.
Okay,
which is, I mean, it's a lot of money, but Wonder Woman was a big movie, character, big movie, and she's the main character. So 300,000 doesn't sound like a lot. Yeah. For this movie, she got 10 million.
Yeah. Okay.
So 33 times
that scale
increase. Yeah.
I suppose her worth as a celebrity increases after the first movie.
Yeah, she became
the screen,
much more popular because she was relatively unknown before she did Wonder Woman.
But that's interesting though, because BVS came out before Wonder Woman 1. Yeah,
so she would have got less for that. Yeah. She's hardly in that movie anyway.
True. Yeah. I'm just wondering how she got so low for Wonder Woman 1. Like, that's interesting.
It's similar to RDJ. I think RDJ got even less than her for the first Iron Man.
Yeah.
And obviously now he gets like...
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Now he negotiates his own scale, so yeah.
Pedro Pascal. So a lot of people don't know this. This is actually the second time he's been in something Wonder Woman related. So there was a pilot for a TV show back in 2011 for Wonder Woman, and he was a character in that. Right, back in 2011.
Nice.
What did he play in that?
It wasn't the same character. It was something. I think it was still a villainous character, but something else.
Interesting.
The end scene. So I don't know if you remember this end scene. I don't know if they planned this because it ended up releasing on Christmas Day. But there's a scene in the snow, and I think it's Christmas time. There's like everyone's happy. There's a couple of kids, or 2 or 3 kids in that scene.
Yeah.
So 2 of the kids are Gal Gadot's own daughters.
Oh, okay.
The boy in that scene is Patty Jenkins' son. There's a man with a girl on the carousel. That's Gal Gadot's husband as well.
Right. Lucky bastard.
For being in the movie or for marrying Gal Gadot?
No comment.
That was a funny scene. I just wanted to see Wonder Woman like get a snowball and absolutely pelt the kid in the face and just knock his head off.
Yeah, the kid throws a snowball at her and he's just like, no, it's fine. It's fine.
So overall, I still think it's not. Given the year we've gone through, It's not a bad movie. Like, it's not a bad movie to watch. It's a fun time. It's not depressing or anything. It's not going to make you even more depressed than you already are. So I think it's all right. But there are obviously flaws. We've talked through this.
Yeah.
It's not a perfect movie, but it's a movie. We're not getting many big movies this year, so it's good.
Take what we can get.
Yeah.
There's another important thing to mention as well, was the fourth wall break towards the end. It was sort of
With
like
Linda Carter?
like not that, but like the end of the movie when she like has that speech with Pedro Pascal and it's going through all the terrible events and going in the world. I felt like it was like, okay, there's like riots going on, there's like fires, there's this and that going on. It's like very.
Do you think it's applicable to the current situation?
I think it was very on the nose. Like, that they were like trying to like, oh, this is 2020, and then the fact that sort of solidified it was the fact that at the end it was like at Christmas. And it released on Christmas Day. So it's like, I think it was very planned. And then Wonder Woman says she's talking to Pedro Pascal. She's saying, no, I'm not talking to you, Max. I'm talking to you. And then like she's talking to everyone else that she's broadcasting to, but she's talking to the audience as well. Yeah. So I felt like that was a bit... I mean, it was interesting, but yeah, a bit on the nose.
Yeah, I don't know if all of that was planned. Maybe it might coincidental.
It might not have been.
But it does seem very applicable to this year.
It's a good time to go and watch, but I think to keep your expectations low.
I don't usually do this, so I'm going to have to do this off the top of my head. So if you had any questions about Wonder Woman 1984 or you had any particular points that you wanted to discuss with us, you can contact us via Twitter, Facebook or Instagram. So on Twitter, it's C Recalibration, and on Instagram and Facebook, it's Cognitive Recalibration. Please do support the podcast by giving us a good review on iTunes or Spotify, because that makes us more discoverable on search engines. And now there's a couple more mechanisms that you can support the podcast by. So one is using our Amazon affiliate links. I'll add the original Wonder Woman series as a link in the description for this episode. And another mechanism is Buy Me a Coffee, where you can give a donation to the podcast, which we'll use to further develop it. So thanks to both of you guys for joining us in absence of Tara and Seth. Good to have you both on. And you're like our DC guy now, so you're going to come on for all the DC movies.
That's it.
Yeah.
If it's bad or if it's DC.
I think the next one's Suicide Squad.
Yes.
James Gunn's Suicide
Squad. That'll be interesting. That'll be interesting.
Cool. Thanks for having us.
No worries. And I'm sure we'll have you back on sooner than later. No, spoilers for the episodes coming up. Thanks everyone for listening, and hope you're all staying safe, and we'll see you guys next time.